It was a bright, sunny morning when Jason, a humble single dad, received an unexpected phone call from his boss, Claire Thompson, the CEO of a successful marketing firm. They had worked closely for the past year, and Jason had always respected her for her leadership and professionalism. She was sharp, always a few steps ahead, and had an unmatched ability to lead their team. But this call was different. "Jason, I need you to do me a favor," Claire's voice echoed through the phone. "My parents are visiting, and I need someone to meet them as my boyfriend." Jason was stunned. He had never imagined something like this happening. Claire, who was always composed, business-minded, and occasionally even a bit intimidating, was asking him to pretend to be her partner. Why? It seemed so out of character. "Claire, I don't think this is a good idea. I'm just a single dad and—" Jason began to protest, his thoughts racing. "Please, Jason," she interrupted, her voice cracking slightly with emotion. "I don't know who else to ask. You're the only one I trust. You know my parents, how they are, and I'm just not ready to face them with the truth. Please. I just need you to help me out this one time." Jason paused, holding the phone to his ear. His heart raced as his mind struggled to make sense of what she was asking. He had always seen Claire as this untouchable figure, a woman who had everything under control, who seemed immune to the pressures that so many others caved under. But now, she was asking for his help, asking him to do something that felt like stepping into a world he didn't belong in. "I don't know, Claire. This feels complicated." "I know," Claire admitted, her voice softening. "But I can't do this alone. I just need you to be there with me, no strings attached. Just pretend to be my boyfriend for a couple of hours. My parents are old-fashioned, and they won't take me seriously unless I show them that I have someone in my life. If they think I'm dating someone responsible, they'll stop pushing me to settle down with someone they choose." Jason was quiet, trying to absorb what Claire had just said. He could understand the pressure she must have been under. Her parents were successful, influential people in their own right, and they undoubtedly had their own ideas of what Claire's future should look like. Jason had heard the rumors about Claire's family before, how they could be controlling and demanding, how they expected their daughter to uphold a certain image. But hearing it directly from her gave it a weight that felt more real than ever. Jason was no stranger to family pressures either. As a single dad, he had constantly battled with people who felt entitled to weigh in on his life, his choices, and even his parenting. But this was different. This wasn't just about him. This was about Claire, this powerful woman who seemed invincible, now vulnerable and asking him for help. "All right," Jason finally said, his voice hesitant, "I'll do it. But this better not come back to bite me." Claire let out a long sigh of relief. "Thank you, Jason. You don't know how much this means to me. I promise this will only be for one day. And after this, I'll handle everything. I just need you to be there, to make it look real." Jason rubbed his temples, trying to shake off the nagging feeling that he was walking into something much bigger than he had initially realized. As a single dad, his life was already complicated enough. He worked long hours, took care of his son, and tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But now, he was being asked to enter a world where appearances mattered more than anything. Claire wasn't just his boss. She was a woman he respected, admired even. She had a reputation that had taken years to build, and he could tell that her parents' expectations had always been a burden for her. But Jason couldn't shake the thought that he was being pulled into a role that would require him to pretend to be something he wasn't, something he had never been. He wasn't a corporate man. He wasn't someone who fit in the world Claire moved in. He was just a regular guy trying to make a living while raising his son. As the day of the meeting approached, Jason felt a mix of dread and anticipation. He spent the morning with his son, doing everything he could to keep his mind off the upcoming event. But it was hard to focus on anything else. The whole idea of pretending to be Claire's boyfriend made him uneasy. What would it mean for his relationship with her afterward? Would she see him differently? But he couldn't back out now. Claire had trusted him, and that meant something. Besides, he wasn't exactly in a position to turn down her request. She had always been fair and kind to him at work, and he owed her for the opportunities she had given him. This was his way of repaying her. Later that afternoon, Jason found himself driving down a long, winding road, heading toward the Thompson family estate. The place was tucked away in the countryside, far from the city. As he pulled into the driveway, he couldn't help but feel like an intruder. The house was enormous, an old Victorian-style mansion surrounded by sprawling fields and lush gardens. It looked like something out of a movie, and Jason felt completely out of place. He parked his car and took a deep breath. It wasn't too late to turn back, to just get in his car and drive away. But he couldn't do that. Claire had asked for his help, and he wasn't going to let her down. Walking up to the front door, Jason tried to calm his nerves. When it opened, Claire stood in the doorway, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Jason, thank you for coming," she said, her voice warm but laced with an underlying tension. She looked stunning, dressed in a simple, elegant white dress that made her look even more radiant than usual. It was strange to see her like this, out of her professional attire with her hair down in soft waves, her smile genuine but nervous. "Are you ready for this?" Jason asked, trying to hide his own anxiety. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, stepping aside to let him in. "Just follow my lead and we'll get through it. It's just a few hours." As they walked inside, Jason couldn't help but notice how the house was filled with old-world charm. The decor was classic, the furniture elegant yet imposing. It was clear that Claire's parents valued tradition and wealth, something that Jason had always known but now felt more intensely. It wasn't just about appearances. It was about maintaining a reputation, an image that Claire had been struggling to uphold for years. Jason glanced over at her. Claire was nervous, her hands slightly trembling as she led him into the parlor where her parents were waiting. Her father, Richard Thompson, sat in a large armchair by the fireplace, his expression unreadable, while her mother, Sarah, stood by the window, gazing out at the garden. They both turned as Claire and Jason entered the room, their eyes quickly assessing him. "This is Jason," Claire introduced him, her voice steady, but there was a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson," Jason said, offering his hand. "Pleasure," Richard replied coolly, shaking his hand but not offering any warmth. Sarah, on the other hand, smiled tightly before quickly returning to her observation of Jason. The tension in the room was palpable. As the evening progressed, Jason found himself playing the part of Claire's boyfriend, smiling and nodding through the questions, pretending to be interested in the conversation. He could see the way her parents sized him up, evaluating his every word and gesture. Claire's mother, especially, seemed to scrutinize him at every turn, making Jason feel like he was under a microscope. At one point, Richard asked Jason about his career, probing deeper than Jason was comfortable with. "So, Jason, what exactly do you do for a living? How do you plan on supporting Claire?" Jason's stomach churned at the question. He wasn't used to this level of scrutiny, especially not from someone like Richard Thompson. "I work in sales," Jason replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I make a decent living and I'm focused on making sure my son has everything he needs." Richard nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving Jason. "I see," he said, his voice flat. "And how long have you and Claire been together?" A few months now," Jason said, surprised by the question but forcing himself to answer. Claire stepped in quickly, sensing the discomfort building in the room. "Actually, Jason and I just recently started dating," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But we've known each other for a while now." Her mother's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing, choosing instead to study Jason more closely. Jason felt his pulse quicken, the pressure mounting with each passing second. This was all a lie, a carefully constructed web of pretense. And yet, as he looked over at Claire, he could see that she was just as uncomfortable as he was, if not more so. She was playing a role she had been forced into, and Jason couldn't help but feel a deep sense of empathy for her. The evening wore on, and by the time dessert was served, Jason could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. He was just an actor in this charade, a pawn in Claire's desperate attempt to meet her parents' expectations. But he could see it in her eyes. This wasn't just about appeasing her parents. This was about something deeper, something she had been struggling with for years. As they sat around the table, the conversation shifting to more neutral topics, Jason realized that he wasn't just helping Claire. He was stepping into a world of pressure, expectation, and control, one that she had been fighting for a long time. And if there was one thing he knew, it was that Claire didn't need anyone's approval. Not hers, not anyone's, but that was something she still had to learn. The evening ended with a polite goodbye, but Jason could tell that things had shifted. The charade was over, and he had played his part. But he couldn't help but wonder, had Claire learned something from this experience? Or had it simply reaffirmed the role she had always been forced to play? The door closed behind him, and Jason made his way back to the car. His heart was heavy, his mind still processing everything that had happened. He hadn't just pretended to be Claire's boyfriend, he had stepped into her world, seen the pressures she faced, and witnessed firsthand how much she had sacrificed for her family's approval. And it made him realize just how much more he needed to support her. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. Jason sat in the plush leather seat of his car, staring at the vast estate in front of him. The Thompson family estate was imposing, surrounded by acres of green grass and towering trees that seemed to shield the house from the outside world. It was as if the house itself stood as a testament to the family's wealth and influence, a reminder that they had the power to shape not just their own futures, but the futures of everyone around them. The mansion loomed in front of him like an ancient monument, a symbol of tradition and control. Claire had always been successful, but Jason knew her success wasn't just about her business acumen. It was about living up to the expectations her family had set for her. She was the golden child, the one who could never fail, never disappoint. The thought of Claire being trapped by those expectations made Jason's stomach churn. As much as she had achieved on her own, it seemed like her parents were always there, watching, pushing, nudging her toward a life they had meticulously designed. Jason had agreed to help Claire, to pretend to be her boyfriend for a day. But as the car engine idled, the weight of the situation began to settle on his shoulders. He wasn't just entering a world he didn't belong in. He was stepping into Claire's life, her real life, the one she kept hidden from everyone else. And that was a much bigger commitment than he had initially realized. He glanced at his phone. Claire had texted him a few minutes earlier, "I'm ready. Just follow my lead, we'll get through this together." Jason took a deep breath and pushed open the car door. The air was fresh, but there was a certain heaviness to it, like the air before a storm. He walked up the grand steps of the estate, his heart racing in his chest. As he rang the doorbell, he felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. This wasn't just about playing a role. This was about supporting Claire, about being there for her when she needed him the most. Claire greeted him with a warm smile, but there was an edge to it, an edge that only Jason could detect. She was nervous, though she tried to hide it. Her white dress shimmered in the soft sunlight, making her look ethereal, almost like a goddess. But Jason saw beyond the image. He saw the woman who had been carrying the weight of her family's expectations on her shoulders for years. "Are you okay?" Jason asked, concern creeping into his voice. He could tell that the stress of this whole situation was taking its toll on her. Claire nodded, though her eyes betrayed her. "I'm fine. Let's just get through this." Jason followed her inside, the grand foyer opening before them like an imposing stage. The scent of freshly polished wood and expensive perfume hung in the air. The walls were adorned with portraits of Claire's ancestors, their stern faces gazing down at him as if to say, "You don't belong here." Her parents were already seated in the grand living room, the fire crackling softly in the background. Richard Thompson, Claire's father, sat in a large armchair by the fireplace, his sharp eyes scanning Jason with a mix of curiosity and indifference. His posture was rigid, his hands folded neatly in his lap. Sarah Thompson, Claire's mother, stood by the window, gazing out at the manicured garden. Her presence was as commanding as her husband's, her eyes sharp, calculating. "Mom, Dad, this is Jason," Claire said, her voice steady but tinged with anxiety. "Jason, these are my parents, Richard and Sarah." Jason extended his hand, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Richard shook his hand firmly, his grip strong, almost testing. "Nice to meet you, Jason. Claire speaks very highly of you." Claire's mother, Sarah, gave him a quick glance before nodding politely. "It's nice to finally meet you," she said, her voice soft but cold. She turned her attention back to the garden, as if uninterested in the pleasantries that were being exchanged. Claire and Jason sat on the couch opposite her parents, the tension in the room palpable. Jason could feel the weight of their gaze, like invisible strings tugging at him, testing his every word, every movement. He wasn't just here to pretend to be Claire's boyfriend. He was here to prove something to Claire's parents, but more importantly, to Claire herself. "So, Jason," Richard began, his voice smooth and calculated. "What do you do for a living?" Jason cleared his throat, unsure of how much to reveal. He wasn't used to talking about his career in such formal settings. "I work in sales, primarily in the tech industry. I've been with my company for a few years now." Richard raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a slight smile. "Sales, huh? That's a tough industry, but I suppose you must be good at it, given your connections." Jason couldn't help but notice the implication in Richard's tone. He was being sized up, judged not by his character or integrity, but by his professional standing. Claire's father wasn't just interested in what Jason did for a living. He was interested in whether Jason was good enough for his daughter. Claire shifted uncomfortably beside Jason, but she quickly masked her unease with a bright smile. "Jason has done quite well for himself. He's a hard worker and he's always there when I need him." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, Jason wondered if she was trying to convince her parents or herself. Her mother, Sarah, finally turned her gaze away from the garden and looked directly at Jason. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as though evaluating him like a specimen under a microscope. "So, Jason, tell me, what do you see in Claire?" "She's a strong, independent woman." "What makes you think you're the right man for her?" Jason swallowed hard. He wasn't used to questions like this. He was used to small talk, to casual conversations, but this was different. This was Claire's mother, and she was testing him, probing for weaknesses. "I think Claire is incredible," Jason said, his voice steady despite the pressure. "She's brilliant, hardworking, and she doesn't take shortcuts. I admire that about her. And, to be honest, I'm just trying to keep up with her." The words felt rehearsed, but they were true. He had always admired Claire, but he wasn't sure if she saw him in the same way. This whole charade felt surreal, like they were playing roles in a game neither of them fully understood. Sarah nodded slowly, her gaze flickering to Claire before returning to Jason. "I see," she said, her tone neutral. "And how do you see your future together?" The question hung in the air, its weight pressing down on Jason's chest. How did he see their future? He hadn't even thought about it. He was just trying to get through the day without making a fool of himself. "I think we take things one step at a time," Jason said, his mind racing. "We're both focused on our careers and we're taking the time to figure things out." Claire's eyes darted to his, her expression unreadable. Jason couldn't help but wonder if she was relieved by his answer or if she was hoping for something more, but her parents didn't seem satisfied. Richard's lips tightened, and Sarah's face remained as impassive as ever. "Well, we'll see how things develop," Richard said, his voice cold but polite. "It's always good to take things slow, especially when it comes to matters of the heart." Jason could feel the weight of his words settle in the room. It was clear that her parents were skeptical of him, of Claire's decisions, of everything. This wasn't just about a casual visit. This was about Claire's future, about her parents' expectations for her. And Jason, for better or worse, had become a pawn in their game. As the evening wore on, Jason began to notice the subtle ways her parents tried to control the conversation, steering it toward topics that were safe, predictable things they could control. There were questions about his background, about his past relationships, about his financial stability. The probing continued, each question a reminder that Jason wasn't just an innocent bystander in this charade. He was being scrutinized, tested to see if he was worthy of Claire. But Claire, for all her grace and beauty, was clearly struggling. Jason could see it in the way she shifted in her seat, the way her smile wavered when her parents asked pointed questions. She wasn't just pretending to be happy. She was fighting to keep the facade intact. And then, as the night drew to a close, Claire's mother turned to her with a final, piercing question. "Claire, do you truly believe this man is the one for you? Or is this just another phase?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, everything went silent. Jason could feel Claire's tension, her hesitation. This was the moment when everything could either fall apart or hold together. Claire took a deep breath, her shoulders straightening as she met her mother's gaze. "I think," she said, her voice steady, "that I need to figure that out on my own. But I trust Jason, he's a good person." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that neither her parents nor Jason could ignore. For the first time that night, Claire had spoken for herself, not for her parents, not for the role they had assigned her. She had spoken for the first time as Claire Thompson, not just as the daughter they had tried to shape. Jason looked at her, a quiet admiration growing in his chest. Maybe this wasn't about pretending. Maybe this was about Claire finding the courage to stand up for herself, to stop living under the weight of her family's expectations. And maybe, just maybe, he had played a small part in helping her find that strength. As they left the estate, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that things had shifted, that Claire had taken a small but important step toward reclaiming her own life. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation he had expected. It wasn't some grand gesture, but it was something. It was a start. As Jason drove away from the Thompson estate, the sky was beginning to fade from orange to dusky purple. The weight of the evening still clung to him, and the questions he had asked himself earlier only grew heavier with time. He couldn't stop thinking about Claire's parents, their scrutiny, their hidden judgments, and more than anything, the fact that Claire had been trapped in their world for so long, pretending to be someone she wasn't just to keep them satisfied. But even more pressing was the realization that she hadn't been fully honest with herself either. The way her father had examined him, the subtle digs her mother had taken every moment felt like a test that Jason wasn't too sure he was passing. Yet the most uncomfortable part of it all was the question Claire's mother had asked. Do you truly believe this man is the one for you? Or is this just another phase? The words lingered in the air like a heavy mist, and Jason couldn't help but wonder if it had been a calculated move by Sarah Thompson, a way to push Claire into a corner, a way to make her doubt her own choices. But in the brief moment before Claire had answered, Jason had seen something he hadn't expected, Claire's hesitation, her inner battle. The words she spoke were her own, but they felt as though they had been forged in the heat of years of living up to someone else's expectations. He glanced at his phone again. A text from Claire appeared. Thanks for tonight. I'll call you later. He could almost hear her voice in his head, her gentle but confident tone cutting through the storm of emotions that were swirling inside him. Jason had agreed to help her tonight, to be the boyfriend she needed to show her parents. But what had started as a simple favor had morphed into something much more complicated, something that felt like it was both personal and raw. But even with the questions and the unease, one thing was clear. Claire was struggling in ways he hadn't fully understood before. She was trying to reconcile the woman she had become with the daughter her parents still expected her to be. It was a battle Jason wasn't sure she was ready to fight alone. Back at his apartment, Jason found himself pacing the living room, his thoughts spiraling. He couldn't shake the image of Claire's face as she sat at the dinner table, her gaze occasionally flickering toward him as if asking for some kind of validation, for a sign that everything was okay. But the more Jason thought about it, the more he realized he couldn't provide that reassurance. This wasn't about him, it was about her. It was about the life she had built and the one her parents wanted to impose on her. Jason had always admired Claire's drive, her ability to carve out her own success in a world that often tried to box women into predefined roles. But now, as he reflected on everything that had happened, he began to see how much of her life had been shaped by those same forces that still had a strong grip on her. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Claire. I'm sorry you had to see all that. I never wanted you to be caught in the middle of my family's mess, but I appreciate you being there tonight. Jason ran his fingers through his hair, wondering what to say in response, but before he could form a reply, his phone rang. Claire's name flashed across the screen. He took a deep breath and answered, Hey, Claire. Jason, she said softly. Her voice sounded tired, strained, as if she had been holding something back all night. I wanted to talk. About everything. Are you free? He sat down on the couch, suddenly feeling the gravity of the situation. I'm here. What's going on? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Claire spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to explain this. I'm not even sure where to start. Jason's heart raced. He could feel the walls of her carefully constructed world cracking, the facade she had kept up with her parents starting to fall apart. You don't have to explain anything, Claire. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But just know, I'm here for you, okay? Another pause. Then Claire's voice broke through, full of emotion. I've spent my whole life trying to be the perfect daughter. I've been following a script that wasn't even mine. My parents? They expect me to be this person they've created in their heads, and I've been playing along. But it's killing me inside, Jason. I don't know who I am anymore. I've been living their dreams, not mine. Jason could hear the anguish in her voice, the crackling vulnerability she had never shown before. This was the side of Claire that no one saw, the side she kept hidden behind the polished, confident CEO persona. The side that felt like she was drowning under the weight of her family's expectations. You don't have to do that anymore, Claire, Jason said softly, his voice steady, but his own heart aching for her. You don't have to live up to anyone else's standards. You're allowed to be who you are. You deserve to be happy. And if that means stepping away from all of this, from them, then that's okay. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here, whatever you decide. I don't even know where to begin, she replied, her voice tinged with both fear and relief. I'd been so afraid of disappointing them. They've always had these plans for me, plans I never agreed to, but I just went along with them. But when I saw the way they looked at you tonight, Jason, I knew I had to make a choice. I don't want to be their puppet anymore. Jason leaned back against the couch, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders as Claire spoke her truth. He wasn't sure how long this journey would take or what the outcome would be, but one thing was certain. Claire had finally begun to break free from the invisible chains that had bound her for so long. You don't have to do it alone, he said gently. I'm with you. But this is your journey. You have to choose what makes you happy. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Claire spoke again, her voice barely audible. I don't even know where to start. Jason took a deep breath, feeling a surge of empathy for her. Start by doing what feels right for you. Let go of the expectations, the judgments. It's okay to disappoint them if it means you can finally live your own life, Claire's voice cracked. But what if they never understand? What if they hate me for this? Jason's heart broke for her. He knew how much she cared about her parents. But he also knew that living for someone else's approval would never bring her true happiness. They might not understand right away, he said softly. But they'll see how much stronger you are when you choose your own path, and if they don't, that's on them, not you. You have to do this for yourself. The silence between them was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes when two people are on the same page, even when they don't have all the answers yet. I think I need some time to figure this out, Claire said, her voice quieter now. I can't do it all at once, but, Jason, thank you for helping me see this. Jason smiled, his heart swelling with affection for her. Anytime. And remember, you don't have to do it alone. I'm here for you every step of the way. As Jason hung up the phone, he felt a deep sense of relief wash over him. For the first time, he truly believed that Claire was ready to take the reins of her own life. She was no longer hiding behind her parents' expectations. She was finally seeing herself clearly for the first time in years. And Jason was more than happy to stand by her side as she took those first steps toward freedom. In the days that followed, Jason and Claire continued to talk. Slowly but surely, she began to take action, distancing herself from the life her parents had imposed on her. She made choices, small, tentative steps at first that were all about her happiness. Not anyone else's, but the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be hard conversations, difficult decisions, and moments when Claire would doubt herself. But Jason knew that, in the end, this would be her fight to win. He could only support her, help her see the possibilities that lay beyond the shadows of her family's control. And as he sat in his apartment, thinking about everything that had happened, Jason realized something important. Sometimes the greatest love isn't about grand gestures or sweeping declarations. It's about showing up when it matters most, about being there for someone as they find the courage to be themselves. This wasn't just about helping Claire with her family. It was about helping her find herself again. And that, he thought, was worth everything. The week after their meeting at the Thompson estate was filled with uncertainty. Claire's life had always been dictated by the expectations of others, particularly her parents. But now she was at a crossroads, a moment of reckoning. where she had to choose between living for herself or continuing to play a role in a life that wasn't her own. She had made the decision to fight for her happiness, but that decision came with its own set of challenges. Jason had been there for her every step of the way, offering his unwavering support as she navigated the complexities of her family's expectations and her own desires. He had helped her see the truth. She didn't have to live her life according to someone else's script. And now, as she stood on the precipice of change, Claire knew she had to take the final step. It was time to reclaim her life. It started with a conversation she had been avoiding for years, the one with her parents. Claire had always known that the moment she chose her own path, it would shatter the carefully constructed image her family had built for her. But she was no longer afraid. She was ready to face the consequences, whatever they might be. The phone rang late one afternoon, and Claire's heart skipped a beat as she saw her mother's name flash across the screen. She had been avoiding this call all week, but now she couldn't put it off any longer. Taking a deep breath, she answered, trying to steady her nerves. "Claire," her mother's voice came through, cool and controlled. "I think we need to talk." Claire's grip on the phone tightened. "Yes, Mom, I agree. There are some things we need to discuss." There was a long pause before Sarah Thompson responded, her tone shifting slightly. "Your father and I were very disappointed with how things went last weekend. You know, we only want what's best for you, but you've been making some choices that don't align with our expectations. We don't understand why you're doing this, Claire." Claire's chest tightened as she listened to her mother's words. She had heard them all before: the disappointment, the subtle manipulation, the judgment disguised as concern. But now, they didn't have the same power over her. "Mom," Claire said, her voice steady but firm, "I've spent my whole life trying to live up to your expectations, and I'm tired. Tired of pretending, tired of doing things because you think it's what's best for me. I need to live my own life, on my terms." Sarah's silence was deafening. Claire could almost hear the wheels turning in her mother's mind as she processed Claire's words. It wasn't what Sarah had expected to hear, but it was the truth, and Claire wasn't going to apologize for it. "I don't think you understand what you're saying," Sarah finally replied, her voice edged with frustration. "You're throwing away everything we've worked for, the family name, the legacy we've built, and for what? A man who doesn't even fit into our world? You know how we feel about Jason?" Claire felt her blood run cold at the mention of Jason's name. Her mother had never liked him, not because of anything Jason had done, but because he didn't meet her high standards. He wasn't from their world, and for Sarah, that was unforgivable. "Jason is a good person," Claire said, her voice unwavering. "He's been there for me in ways no one else has. He's not a part of our world, but that doesn't make him any less important. I care about him, and I'm not going to apologize for that." "Claire, you're making a mistake," Sarah said, her voice softening, but only slightly. "You don't know what you're giving up. You don't understand the consequences of your actions." Claire took a deep breath, steadying herself. "No, Mom, I understand better than I ever have. And I'm not going to let fear control me anymore. I need to do this for myself." The line went silent again, and Claire's heart raced. She could almost feel her mother's disapproval seeping through the phone, but Claire didn't care. She had made her choice, and it was the right one for her. "Fine," Sarah finally said, her voice cold. "But don't come crying to us when this blows up in your face. You're on your own now, Claire." As the call ended, Claire felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had finally said the words she had been avoiding for years. And even though she knew her relationship with her parents would never be the same, she also knew it was the right thing to do. She wasn't going to let anyone, not even her parents, dictate her happiness. That evening, after the conversation with her mother, Claire called Jason. The moment he answered, she could hear the concern in his voice. "Claire, what happened? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It's done. I told her everything. I told her that I couldn't live my life according to her expectations anymore." Jason exhaled sharply as if he had been holding his breath. "You're incredible, Claire. I knew you could do it." "I don't know what's next," she admitted. "But I know this. I'm done living for them. I have to live for myself now. I'm scared, but I feel free." Jason's voice softened. "You should be proud of yourself. This isn't easy. But you're stronger than you think." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them knowing that this was just the beginning of something new, something uncertain. But for the first time, Claire felt like she was in control of her own life. She was no longer a puppet in her parents' game. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions. Claire had made her choice, but the fallout was inevitable. Her parents refused to speak to her, and Claire had to face the reality that they might never accept her decision. But as painful as it was, she refused to turn back. This was her life, and she wasn't going to live it according to someone else's rules. As for Jason, he remained her rock. He never pushed her to make any decisions, but he was always there, offering unwavering support when she needed it most, and that made all the difference. Jason wasn't just a part of the fight for Claire's independency. Was the one who had helped her see that she deserved better, that she didn't have to choose between her happiness and her family's approval. One evening, as Claire sat on the balcony of her apartment, looking out over the city lights, Jason joined her. He took a seat beside her, his presence calming and steady. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "I know it hasn't been easy and it's not over, but you've made it through the hardest part." Claire smiled, her eyes meeting his. "I couldn't have done it without you. You were the one who showed me that I didn't have to live for anyone else's approval. That it's okay to choose myself?" Jason's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "You've always had the strength within you, Claire. You just needed someone to remind you of that." The moment hung between them, full of unspoken words and quiet understanding. They didn't need grand gestures or declarations, they just needed each other. In that moment, they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. A few weeks later, Claire's parents reached out to her. The message was brief, their tone cold, but not as harsh as it had been before. They wanted to meet, to discuss things. Claire felt a mixture of apprehension and hope as she agreed to meet them. When she arrived at their house, the atmosphere was tense. Her parents were sitting in the same living room where they had first questioned her choices, the place where everything had started to unravel. But now, as she sat across from them, she felt stronger than she had ever been. Richard and Sarah looked at her with a mix of disappointment and resignation. "We've thought about what you said," Richard began. "And while we don't agree with your decisions, we can see that you're serious. We've never seen you like this before, Claire. You've always been so compliant, so willing to follow the path we set for you." Claire swallowed hard, her voice steady but emotional. "I'm not the same person I was. I can't live my life for you anymore. I have to live for myself." There was a long silence, but this time it didn't feel like a barrier. It felt like an opening, like the first crack in a wall that had been built over years of unspoken expectations. Sarah was the first to speak. "We don't understand, but we can see that you're happy, and we want you to be happy. Even if it's not the life we envisioned for you." Claire's heart swelled with emotion, but she held back her tears. This wasn't the acceptance she had hoped for, but it was a start. Her parents might never fully understand, but they were beginning to see her as her own person, not just their daughter. "I appreciate that," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll always love you both, but I have to follow my own path now." Richard and Sarah nodded, though their eyes remained wary. But for the first time in a long while, Claire felt like she had taken the first step toward healing, not just with her parents, but with herself. In the end, Claire's ultimate revenge wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It wasn't about creating a dramatic confrontation or shaming her family. It was about taking control of her own life, choosing herself over the expectations that had suffocated her for so long. And in doing so, she had become the woman she had always been meant to be: strong, independent, and unapologetically herself. And Jason, through it all, had been her constant. He had helped her see the power within herself, and he had stood by her as she took the steps toward freedom. Together, they had proven that love wasn't about playing a role. It was about supporting each other through the hardest moments, and choosing to walk together on the road ahead, no matter where it led.